Welcome to Leadership Forward, where you'll meet Arizonans with innovative answers to our state's greatest challenges. I'm Dawn Wallace from the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership at the Flinn Foundation. I'm very excited for my guest today. She's a good friend, a longtime colleague, but her claim to fame, I think, is really she's the only person who has ever convinced me to put on hiking boots and go out into the outdoors voluntarily. And for that, I'm very grateful. And I want to introduce my guest today, Sarah Weber, 2017 Flinn-Brown Fellow, good friend, and someone I've worked with for years and years and years. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you, Dawn, for inviting me. I'm honored to be here on the podcast and excited to get to chat with you for 40 some odd minutes. That's a treasure.
Well, I was referencing our field trip to Rockin' River Ranch, which is the newest Arizona state park. You took about 30 Flinn-Brown Fellows out there, and we got a guided tour, and we took a hike to the river, and saw birds, some really beautiful birds. And everyone was surprised to see me there because I generally do not like it. But I have to tell you, it was just stunningly beautiful and made me think that, we should do more things outdoors. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That warms my heart.
Tell me a little bit about, before we get into it, tell me about how Rockin' River came to be.
Yeah, Arizona State Park, Rockin' River, which is in Camp Verde, just about an hour and a half north of Phoenix, for those in the valley. There was legislation passed, it was about 8 years ago, almost a decade, to make this a state park. And it was one of those things where it took a lot of time and energy to get it right and get it open to the public. The property sits right on the Verde River. And that's one of the things that makes it so great is it's this beautiful riparian area. In addition to that, there's some historical significance that the ranch house there was actually, that's where the county used to hold these musical events. They'd come out and they'd have like rodeos, they'd have people sing. And that's something I think down the road, not to that scale, but I hope there'll be music again in the park. But really, it's just an opportunity for folks to come outside with their families, like you said, and go down and play by the river.
Yeah, it was a wonderful morning. We had the mayor of Cottonwood out there in his what do you call the trailer? The pin drop trailer. Mm-hmm. And he was making eggs and pancake. Mm-hmm. And we had the Regners and a whole bunch of Nikki Check was there, mm-hmm. who's now a new Yavapai County supervisor. Well, I should have mentioned at the onset that the reason that you got all of us out there is that you currently serve as the Deputy Director of State Parks and Trails, which seems like the perfect job for you. Would you say it's...
Yes, I have the best job in the world. People always ask me and they say it jokingly, so you just get to go hiking all the time? I'm like, yeah, pretty much. and obviously there's a lot more to that, but it's an amazing job when you go out and you visit a state park and afterwards your staff are like, thank you so much for coming here. And I'm like, I am so happy to be here. And I still pinch myself going, wow, I get paid to do this. So it's an honor to serve in this role. Well,
let's start with your journey to perfection. So tell me, are you originally from Arizona or do you move here? What's your sort of origin story?
That's a great question. So I grew up primarily in Utah and California. And fun fact about me that I discovered when I moved to Arizona, I was recruited actually by at the time was a future Flinn Fellow, but Fletcher Monsingo, and came out as part of the Office of Budgeting for the governor's office to Syracuse, which is in New York. That's where I did my master's in public administration. And they made a pitch for Phoenix, for Arizona, for what was happening. And I said, that sounds really interesting. And it sounds like they're really doing things that matter. And I came out and started as a budget analyst. But backing up before that, what I didn't know when I moved out here is that I had roots on both sides of my family in Arizona.
Really? Where?
Yes. So surprisingly, Keams Canyon, which I don't know if anyone will know where that is. It's up in northern Arizona, is where my grandfather was born. And his father worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so he worked on the reservation. And so he was born out there, raised out there, later moved out, but obviously has lots of stories to tell about that. On the other side, my grandmother on my father's side was born in a home in Safford, Thatcher that's still there. I went there and I found it.
Really?
Yes. That her grandfather built for his family.
Oh, my
and
goodness.
we have a painting. My dad had this painting of the home that her mother had painted. And that and some very confusing directions that were based on the memory of my grandmother's brother, who was like 90.
My goodness.
And I was able to go out and find the house, and I knocked on the door and talked to the person who lived there. And it was a really special moment for me.
Well, that's really neat. So you are sort of, I guess,
Once removed.
And it just sort of makes sense then that, your heart is in, your heart's here in Arizona. I mean, you said that to me on many occasions. So South Utah University is where you got your bachelor's. Then you went on to Syracuse, the Maxwell School, which is an amazing school for public administration. And then you came to OSPB, which is something you and I share. That's where I got my start as well. It's the best education you could ever have for public service. Would you agree? Or?
Yes, I love my experience at Syracuse. And something that not a lot of people know about me, but in between my master's and my bachelor's, I was a social worker. And I served it was a rural women's shelter in a tri-county area.
The Canyon Creek Women's Center?
Yes. And that was a really, just to have that job right out of undergrad, very eye-opening, but really important for me because at that point, I was implementing policies at the program level, as a case manager, and things like TANF and domestic violence, things like that. And I got to a point where I said, man, I really want to be able to influence at more of a policy maker role here. How can I do that? And that's how I ended up getting my master's. I thought I was going to go and be, run a nonprofit and go back and do that. And never in my wildest dreams thought I end up being a budget analyst. But that was such an amazing foundational experience for me because then I learned about state government through the budget. And I just fell in love with the variety, all the amazing things that happen in state government. You have such a great impact on, over 7 million people who live in the state. But it's also, as we all know, I think as fellows, that it's small enough that we're really able to see the impact that we make and really experience that network and work that we do.
Well, I mean, they're two different sectors, the nonprofit sector and the public sector, but the common denominator is service to others, right? And direct service to others. So I actually don't see that. I mean, I work in nonprofit now and everyone says, well, how is it different? I mean, there's that line is really fuzzy, right? Because you are sort of serving the same constituencies. You're serving Arizonans, but from maybe a different capacity. So OSPB and got that great education, learned about state government, and then you sort of moved on up a couple of floors, right?
Yes, and I will never forget another fellow, Ben Henderson, who at the time was the deputy chief of operations, and called me up and said, "Hey, I'm leaving the governor's office. I'm going on to do something else. I think you should apply for this job." And I said, "Oh my goodness, let's sit down. Let's have a drink. Let's talk about this." And at his encouragement, I don't know that I would have thought to apply. I think I would have counted myself out, but he invited me in and I applied for the position and it was a whirlwind. But I served as the deputy chief of operations in the governor's office up until I believe 2020. And then I was asked to take on the chief of operations by another fellow, Daniel Ruiz, when he was promoted to chief of staff. I got to work with folks like you and just so many incredible public servants.
Talk a little bit about the role of, I mean, it's been called different things in different administrations, but I mean, in a nutshell, you are essentially the overseer of state government operations. Talk a little bit more about what that means from a sort of day-to-day basis.
Yes. So I describe this in kind of like three parts. There's one is responding to the crisis of the day. Like whatever you turn on the news and is going wrong, whether it's a forest fire, a prison break, and a pandemic, that's like first thing on the list that you're working on when you're in state government operations is engaging at those issues that crop up, no matter who's in the administration. Two, really managing the cabinet, and that means working directly with agency directors. Also in that is like the performance management side of looking at how do we measure quality, efficiency, customer service, all these critical things. How do we know that we're doing the work of state government and that we're doing it well? And then the other part, the third part, which is often sometimes the hardest to find time for, but is so rewarding for me, was those special initiatives. How do we make state government better? How do we use less space? How do we improve our leadership programs that we have for state employees? How do we make hiring processes simpler? These things sound mundane, but they can have such a huge impact on our state.
I mean, they're important to taxpayers. At the end of the day, taxpayers want a government that works, that's lean and good, and that really starts with the people who are doing the work in all the agencies, whether it's DES to state land to DPS. And what's really fun about this is that the person who came after you in this administration is Ben Henderson, another fellow. I think that you're just going to be spending the rest of your life just in and around, intertwined with Flinn-Brown Fellows, because you're going to tell me a few more connections throughout this interview. But you were, along with Daniel Ruiz, who is a fellow, you two handled the pandemic. And that was probably, he said it was probably the most traumatic thing, but probably the most sort of rewarding in terms of being able to help people. There were a lot of really amazing things that I remember you being a part of. For me personally, the work that you did around early education, the daycares, the place where moms could drop off their kids so they could go to work or they could go to the classroom. That was really wonderful. Tell me what sort of you remember about that time, and maybe what changed you or, made you think differently as a result of going through that and leading the state through that 100-year, pandemic.
That was one of those moments where you realize like this is that moment that people talk about that is going to define my life and my career in many ways, and all of ours. And when you're in the moment and it's happening, that is such a weird experience. The enrichment centers, which you spoke about. So a friend of mine came to me and said, hey, I have this idea of something we could do. And can we provide for essential workers childcare? We know all these kids are out of school right now. Is this something that we could do? And we pulled together a team from across state government and said, hey, can we do this? And by the way, can we do it like now? And within 2 weeks, we had a network of childcare providers across the entire state. And something that I think is easy to forget about the pandemic is that public servants came together. The creativity, the work ethic, the sacrifice that happened. It was amazing that I could make a call and people were like, yes, absolutely. And we were doing meetings like 3 times a day, checking in. People were working around the clock to make this happen. People from like IT and HR, like they had no business doing this, but they stepped up because they're public servants. And I love what you said earlier when you're talking about, the joy of public service. In my mind, there's so many people out there, and I think these emerging generations, they want to make a difference. They care about a lot of things, including obviously a paycheck, but more than that, being a part of something that means something to their ethics and their ethos. And state government, public public service has that to offer. That's why I think the work that you're doing, not just through the Flinn-Brown Network, but the Flinn organization, the scholars, is so incredible. So I will always be pounding my fist on the table saying, like, we should have a line out the door of people who want to come and work in state government. I was lucky enough to be able to step into this role. I don't know if you know this, but I think I became the deputy COO. I was probably around, 27. I just turned 33. So, when I stepped into the COO role and I was supervising directors of state agencies that had careers that were longer than mine, it was incredibly humbling. And what I told myself is, okay, if the governor trusts me to do this job, if my superiors trust me to do this job, then who am I to question it? And I'm going to do the best that I can. And I think that experience has left me better as a leader, which is kind of, I think, the question you've asked about. It was kind of that trial by fire, but also with, a real desire to be able to give back and help others who are on their leadership journey.
Yeah, you were mentioning sort of this younger generation of folks, and you couldn't be more right. I speak to a lot of young people, and they are just so hungry to make impact and to change things that they just don't agree with. The things that my generation accepted for so long, and the millennials just kind of like breezed by. They're like, no, thank you. The problem really is that they're also at the same time very disillusioned with the leadership of our elected leadership, or, folks who have been in this work. And so why I think Flinn-Brown really means something beyond just the sort of collaboration that you all do and getting things done. The fellows are role model is such a tough word. It implies so much, but they serve as sort of an example that good leadership can exist. And that's part of the reason we do these podcasts. Is part of the reasons that we get Flinn-Brown Fellows in front of students is, they want to make change, but at a certain point, they will hit a wall and they will say, well, I'm not going to, my vote doesn't count, which they say a lot, because they hit a wall because they don't get to meet people who are inspiring to them. So, I think that's, again, what I see as being valuable for Flinn-Brown as someone on the outside, not someone in the network that's sort of doing stuff. And so when you talk about young people, I spoke to the Governor's Youth Commission this last weekend, Sarah, and they were just the most extraordinary young people. But, when you ask them specific questions about, are you happy with this? And they're not. So hopefully that's a sort of a motivation to get them somewhere. But it's also really important that they seek public service. And because they're sort of torn, I don't know if that's the path for them. So I guess my question to you is, as someone who was working in government, in public service, like, why do you think the public struggles so much with its trust and confidence in who are amazing leaders? Like, there were great agency directors under Ducey. There are amazing agency directors under Governor Hobbs. Why the distrust?
Oh, that's a big question. Honestly, I think it's because the public, they don't see the good as much as they see the nonsense. And there's a lot of nonsense. I would imagine every Flinn Fellow has had multiple moments where you've said, man, why am I a part of this? Like, this is, you see things happening and you go, why am I doing this? Why am I putting my family through this? And there's a choice to be made of, do I step back and say, I'm not going to participate in this. I don't agree with what's happening. Or, you know what? I'm going to choose to show up because that's the only way I can change it. And it's very situational. It's very individual. I'll never tell anyone what to do. But I feel like the Flinn Network for me has given me the camaraderie to say, I can show up even when it's hard. because I know I'm not alone.
Well, and that's really what Jack was envisioning when he started the program. I mean, he was envisioning that we would get enough fellows and who are like-minded, who are interested in just doing good work into different roles that impact public policy. And then once you get to a critical mass, right, then you are, and, it's not just one person, it's now a collective. And I think we've demonstrated that through the fellows we have in state government and local government and nonprofit and all the other things that they do. But let's switch gears a little bit and talk about something a little bit more fun, which is I kind of want to know, you are a creative person. You are a very, very creative person. You love the arts. You love the outdoors. You love nature. Tell me how you've kind of blended those two things together, not only in your sort of personal pursuits, but at state parks and trails. You have an artist in residence now, and I love that, and I want to hear more about it.
Okay, I'm so excited about this program, and I have to give a plug to our team. The Artist in Residence program is a finalist for the Arizona Forwards Awards, so we're very excited about that.
Which you're a fellow with the Arizona
Yes, I went through their leadership program as well, and they're a conservation sustainability network here. It's been here a long time.
Oh, yeah, good organization.
But the Artist in Residence program exists at the National Park Service, right, where you have artists come in, they reside on property at a park, and they will create art while they're there. And this isn't just like someone out there painting beautiful portraits of landscapes. This is multimedia, community-involved art. And so the former interim arts commissioner, and I got together, and our meeting started with her telling me that she wasn't going to take on any projects because she was interim. And it ended with us leaving with this project that we were going to take on.
That sounds like Jackie.
and we said, it just seemed like such an amazing opportunity to partner. It brings people into this public space of the park, connects them with nature, but it also connects them with each other. So we piloted the Artist in Residence project down at Oracle State Park, which is north of Tucson, and Oracle, which is a really cool art community, such an amazing place. And my team was so great. They said, you know what, we were going to do one artist, but there were just so many. We're going to do 3. So we piloted 3 artists, each of them a different type of artist. And then we showcased that at the end with a performance that included music, this really cool visual light show that was projected onto the historic ranch, and then some printmaking that was actually, people could go and you could do it. So you were like really? A part of it. And what was amazing to me about this event is you left, again, it was a connection of not just I'm here at this park looking at this tree, you're here at this park looking at this tree, but now there's art that's created that has a shared sense of meaning, and helps us connect of what does it mean to be a part of this place, and just so powerful. I'm so excited to see where this goes. I hope we expand it to future parks across the state. I hope it brings people to the outdoors that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been there. And I also hope it brings people closer to art that maybe normally wouldn't think of themselves as, consumers of public art.
Well, I mean, it's their nature and art. I mean, they're sort of sisters, right, to each other. I mean, nature is beautiful and art and majestic, and then art is just, it's in the eye of the beholder, right? So yeah, when Jackie told me about that, I actually said to her, because I serve as the chair of the commission, said, Jackie, we are trying to do so many things. We're in flux, but do you really want to take this on? And she says, absolutely. And so it's been really wonderful to see that come to fruition. Also to see agencies working together collaboratively on projects. I mean, I think that creates, for me, a better government, right? When we're leveraging each other's resources and talents and purpose. So, but that sort of focus on art, that's a personal passion of yours too. You sit on the theater board. Mm-hmm. I learned today you're a certified yoga instructor. It's like, how do I not know these things? You write poetry and do some other things. I mean, so like, where did that passion come from? Is that
Yeah, that's a great question.
And you travel, and I want to talk about your travels.
Oh, I want to talk about traveling too. It goes back to, as a kid, I would take the bus to the art museum, and it was like a 40-minute bus ride, and I would take the bus there, and I just loved it. If I could like go back and have another career and not worry about making money, I'd probably, it'd be something in the arts. And I did community theater very poorly. But it was just something I think I loved from a really young age. And so I was so excited to be able to support the arts now in a different capacities in my community, because it was something that it just inspired me. I was a small kid in a small town, and it was something, it uplifts, it inspires, it connects you to other people. I don't know. So it's very deeply personal. But do you want to talk about yoga?
Well, I want to say that like anyone I've met who's had this like sort of passion always has a story of like, well, I took a bus, 25 minutes to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how you know that you care about something, is when, it's not easy to get it. So, I mean, I had my version of that with things I love to read. Mm-hmm. And, we didn't have a lot of money, and there weren't books showing up at the house, that you had to go to the library.
Yes.
And so, that is a common theme with people who are just really passionate. So, tell me about the yoga, and then tell me about all the traveling, because you and Fletcher, who's going to love that his name was brought up twice during this, you guys take bike rides and you go hiking and you do all these things, and it makes me exhausted when I see your travels on Facebook. So tell me about the yoga, and then tell me about traveling.
Okay, great. Actually, I'll tell you. So I've practiced yoga a long time, and it was actually in 2021, I went on a Grand Canyon 16-day river trip, private permit. So me and 16 other people, or 15 other people, Fletcher was one of them.
I remember it.
Down the Grand Canyon. And that was the impetus for me becoming a yoga instructor, because every day on the beach as we're getting ready to leave, and we'd do some stretches, and a couple people said, hey, are you a yoga instructor? And I was like, no, I've always thought about it. Like, oh, you should do that. And then afterwards, someone from the group connected me to someone who was doing a yoga training, and I fell in love. Something that, again, helps me. I think when you've had these jobs, like we talk about, where the pandemic or other, you're in emergency management, you're in public service, and there's a lot of pressure, not just to, meet a deadline, but to take care of people. And you get one chance. That can create a real burden, I think, on people that can have an emotional, mental
health.
Exactly. Yeah. What I love about yoga is that it connects. It's using our physiology that's a part of us to manage that, and giving us tools that already exist in our body, breathing, moving, right? To be able to be in a more centered, balanced space that for me allows me to better serve myself, my family, my community. So one of the things I'm really passionate is combining all those things and doing yoga in nature. And I can go on, and maybe we'll get to talk about more about the benefits of nature. So for me, when we can combine those two, it's like the sweet spot. So I'm trying to find opportunities to.
Do you do your
make
classes
that happen.
Outside?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So it's not in a studio. It's like the backdrop is, I don't know, a preserve, or
ideally
a mountain, or
somewhere quiet and serene. We're
Is it restorative yoga, or are you trying to get a workout in? There's so many different.
Yeah, there's so many different types of yoga. I I'll tell you, I practice hot yoga, which is the one I never recommend
Sarah,
for people.
no,
I know.
no.
It's like, yeah, it's brutal. It's kind of twisted. But what I like to teach is the gentle, restorative,
yes.
Let's lay on the ground for a while and be warm and cozy.
I'm in with that. The hot yoga sounds a little risky to, 55-year-old woman who's in the heart attack range. But, no. So tell me more about that. Tell me about the benefits of nature and what that's brought. I mean, how perfect is this job of yours?
Yeah.
Is it even a job?
No, it's not. I'm
very jealous.
It's amazing. Yeah. I'm so lucky to be in this space. And we have a really incredible team too. And what I love is that you'll go talk to a park ranger or a manager or whomever in the organization. And you know what they want to talk about? The last hike that we did. And, oh, by the way, have you gone here? And if you go here and you go down this trail, there's just a shared passion for the outdoors and people showing up because they really love what they do.
Are you allowed to tell us your favorite state park?
That's
Come on.
the number one question.
Just do three then. Just do three.
Asks. Oh, my goodness.
And then rank them in order.
No. I can give you a couple of because if you haven't been out to our state parks, I mean, I love, if you go to what we call the West Coast, which is up by Lake Havasu, we have about 4 parks that are right there along the river. And you can camp right there, go out on the beach. Cattell is I've had a lot of fun times there where, you can literally play on the beach and you're like, where am I? You're in Arizona. And there's trees and it's stunning. You can go to northern Arizona. We have some really incredible, Reardon Mansion is one of our incredible historic park, but also everyone loves. One of the more popular, when I ask people that question, they'll say Fool's Hollow Lake, which is in Show Low, and it's pine trees and, this big, beautiful lake you can go swim in. There's bald eagles, and every morning you'll see the elk come and swim across the lake. Really fun. And then you can go down to southern Arizona, which Patagonia Lake State Park, which is in Patagonia, which I love. It's such a cool little
city. We have a
city.
fellow in Patagonia. She's on the council there.
Yes. It's such a fun community.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. And they have a great little couple of cool restaurants and bars. The Arizona Trail goes through there. But the lake itself, the birding there is incredible. And there's these sites that you can kayak to. So if you want to camp, you can kayak and camp, and there's bathrooms there and everything. And then you can wake up the next day and kayak back, which I think is just a really fun. But the sunsets there are incredible. And they have a mariachi festival around next month, I think. That's what I love is our state parks, they're a part of the communities that they're in. And so, each and every one has something unique to offer. So again, it's like my children. I can't choose a favorite. But
all right.
Those are
aren't
3.
You contractually obligated to say Karshner Cavern?
Yes, it's the jewel of our park system. It's incredible. And the story about how that was preserved through the legislature and all the people. I mean, Charles, who still works for us, and he's in his 80s now.
He gave me the tour.
Yes.
When I went down there with my family, I met him and he was so proud. Yeah. It was a great tour.
Yeah. The stories there are incredible. Yeah. And that's what's important is each of these state parks, there's stories behind it. There's people who said, hey, we want to preserve this to be a part of our community. We want it to be a state park. And there's all these public servants and community members and legislative elected leaders who made that possible.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, if it wasn't enough, your amazing job, but, all the community service that you do, but you've just recently started teaching.
Yes.
So tell me about Next Generation
Service Corps. Yes. So Arizona State University, the public Watts College has this program, Next Generation Service Corps. It's for undergrad students who are a part of it. And it's preparing them to be exactly what we talked about, leaders, in their future. And so these are cross-disciplinary students that are in this program. There's certain requirements, and then they take a couple of classes. And it's really applied learning. And that's what I love. The course I teach is the Community Impact Lab. And students are paired with a community partner. So if anyone listening to this wanted to join as a partner, they essentially say, hey, here's a problem that we have. And this group of students works like a group of consultants. And we use design thinking to essentially analyze the problem, look at the customer's experience, design, prototype, and test a solution that then is presented to the community partner. And I loved it. I actually work primarily with like boomers on up. And I love that. I really do. But I don't work day to day with people that are younger than me. And I just loved getting that engagement. They were so creative. I'll share this example. I think people will appreciate this. So as a state government employee, when I checked to say, hey, has anyone used Google Docs before? It's changed a little bit, but like most people, maybe there's always someone who maybe hasn't. And so we'll work on that. With my students, one of their assignments is through Google Docs. And I said, has anyone never used this before? Not a hand raised, right? And so I love seeing their creativity, what they brought. They're so adept in this electronic, digital world that we live in. But also I liked seeing them be challenged by like the real world. Scheduling. It's challenging, right? We all know, like sometimes that's the biggest barrier is just getting it on the calendar. And then, facing all the different levels of decision makers and who's really driving this and trying to solve these more complex issues and then facing and learning some of the real barriers that exist. I think it's really good for them. So
is it a semester-long?
Semester-long course. And they do a lot of in-class kind of workshop type experience. So it's a lot of discussion and minimal lecture, which is good because people, I'm sorry to tell you, they don't want to listen to me talk that long.
Well, I've enjoyed listening to you talk for this 30 minutes or almost 40 minutes that we've been. Let me just conclude. You have been such an amazing part of the Flinn-Brown Network, and the reason we created this podcast is to showcase our fellows, the work that they're doing, but also to sort of bring together and connect the impact of the network. You've already mentioned sort of all of the connections that got you here that are Flinn-Brown Fellows, but if someone was thinking about doing this program, what would you say has been the most meaningful part of the experience for you?
I think what's been most meaningful, I'm going to give like two answers. So when I first went through the program, and I know I wouldn't be qualified today to go through the program. And so I'm so grateful that I was selected to go through. It opened my eyes to see the world, which was exactly what I wanted, which is outside of the, ivory tower of the governor's office that I would existed in, and we all are in a silo, whether or not we want to be, right? We see things through our experiences. And so when you sit there for 8 weeks and you hear from all these different perspectives, and every single person is knowledgeable and passionate and experienced, and there is a lot of difference of opinion, that helped me so much, because in the future, as you're discussing these issues, you see that there's more than a black and a white, that there is a lot of gray there. And it helps you to understand even the opinions and points of view that you don't agree with. So that would be like the first. I think the second for me is the humanness of the network. It's only a little over 400 people, and it isn't I'll pat your back, you pat my back. It really is a human network. I mean, I've had Flinn Fellows have opened their home and said, come on over, let's have a beer. And we just chatted and sat around the fire, right? And so that's what I appreciate is no matter how, and there are so many prestigious titles and accolades and resumes that exist within Flinn, that when everyone comes together, it's really just as humans who, like you said, we're just trying to make our state a little bit better, the best we can, and we know we can do that better together.
Well, I'll finish by asking you this very big question. What do you love most about Arizona? Besides your family, your boys, and the people you're sharing your life with, what makes you the most happy about being in Arizona?
When you ask me that question, my mind is flooded with so many memories I've been able to have of like watching the sunset, whether it's looking over a canyon on a river and there's, birds flying, hiking a mountain, coming down and you're tired and sweaty, or just driving over Tempe Town Lake and you see the sunset and the clouds like light up in the sky for a moment. Like that's what I love about Arizona.
It's the best. I love being in Arizona and seeing not only the beauty of it's a very unique ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
And it's ours, and it's uniquely ours. It's also got some of the most unique cultures, but it has an urban life, it has a rural life, it's got a suburban life. So I'm a big fan, and I'm glad that we have such amazing people like you here. Sarah, it's always been my pleasure to spend time with you, whether it was in the work environment or whatever. I'm giving you, because I love you so much, I'm giving you permission to get me out to another nature type thing in the near future. And you can decide where that is, but I will do it. I will be a good sport. I will not complain.
You heard it here, folks.
I will do it because you've made me now a believer.
I'm hearing like some Flinn-Brown yoga in the park, maybe.
I'm in the park. In front of Flinn, we have that beautiful grassy area.
Anytime.
That's right across from the museum and the opera, and it's just a really nice backdrop. Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
All right. That wraps up this episode of Leadership Forward. You can find out more about the work of the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership at our website, azcivicleadership.org.